The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. No return address, just my name written in neat block letters. I'd found it mixed in with the usual bills and junk mail, but something about it made my stomach clench. My name is Margot, and until that moment, I thought I had everything figured out. Successful furniture business, beautiful 5-year-old twin daughters, and a husband who, despite his occasional moodiness, seemed devoted to our family. Funny how one piece of paper can shatter your whole reality. I waited until Sophie and Lily were absorbed in their afternoon cartoons before opening it. My hands trembled slightly as I slid my finger under the flap. A single photograph fell onto the counter, face down. There was a note too, typed in plain text, "Thought you should know what your husband does on his business trips to Chicago." The photo showed Liam sitting at a dimly lit restaurant, leaning close to a woman I'd never seen before. Her hand rested on his arm, fingers curled intimately around his wrist. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 weeks ago, when he'd told me he was closing a major real estate deal. "Mommy, can we have apple slices?" Sophie's voice made me jump. I quickly stuffed the photo and note back into the envelope, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetie. Go back to watching TV with your sister. I'll bring them in a minute." My phone buzzed, speaking of the devil. Liam's text read, "Stuck in traffic. Don't wait up for dinner." I stared at his message, remembering how he'd been stuck in traffic a lot lately. The signs had been there, late nights at the office, mysterious phone calls he'd take outside, the way he'd grown distant over the past few months. I'd brushed it all off, telling myself I was being paranoid. The girls' laughter drifted in from the living room, and my chest tightened. They were too young to understand why Daddy wasn't home for dinner again. Too innocent to know that their perfect little world might be built on lies. I pulled out my phone again, fingers hovering over Zoe's number. My best friend would tell me to confront him immediately, demand answers. But something held me back. If Liam was hiding this, what else didn't I know? The doorbell rang, making me flinch. Through the peephole, I saw Helen, my mother-in-law, standing there with her usual rigid posture. Perfect timing, as always. "Margot, dear," she said as I opened the door, air-kissing my cheek. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to see my granddaughters. Her eyes swept past me, searching the house. "Is Liam home?" "Traffic," I said shortly, watching her face for any reaction. Did she know? Had she always known? Again? She clicked her tongue. "That boy works too hard." But then, the Donovan men have always been dedicated providers. She paused, giving me that familiar look. "Speaking of Donovans, have you and Liam given any thought to trying again? For a boy this time?" I felt the envelope burning a hole in my back pocket. "Actually, Helen, now isn't a good time. The girls need their dinner, and I have some work to finish." She pressed her lips together, clearly disappointed. "Of course, dear. Just remember, the Donovan name needs to be carried on." "Yes, I know." I closed the door perhaps a bit too firmly, leaning against it as her footsteps faded away. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Liam, "Love you. Kiss the girls goodnight for me." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out the photograph again, studying the woman's face. She was younger than me, probably late 20s, with an artistic vibe about her. Everything I wasn't. The sound of small feet padding into the kitchen snapped me back to reality. "Mommy?" Lily called. "Where are our apple slices?" I tucked the envelope away, my mind already forming a plan. "Coming, sweetheart. Mommy just needs to make a few calls first." I waited up for Liam that night, the envelope burning a hole in my pocket as I sat in our darkened kitchen. The twins were finally asleep after 3 bedtime stories and countless questions about why Daddy missed dinner again. The clock on the microwave read 11:43 when I heard his key in the door. "You're still up?" He smiled that easy smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made my stomach turn. I thought I told you not to wait. We need to talk. I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the counter between us. His expression didn't change as he loosened his tie. Can it wait until morning? I'm exhausted. No, it can't. I slid the photograph across the granite countertop. Who is she, Liam? He barely glanced at it. A client. Where did you get this? A client who holds your wrist like that? My voice cracked slightly. Don't insult my intelligence. Liam ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. You're being paranoid, Margot. It was a business dinner. Riley's an interior designer I'm working with on the Chicago project. Riley. He'd given her a name without meaning to. I filed that away. The same project that was supposed to close 3 weeks ago? I watched his face carefully. The one you said was finished? Things got complicated. He moved toward the refrigerator, his back to me. You know how these deals are. Sometimes they take longer than expected. The casual way he lied made me wonder how many other lies I'd swallowed over the years. Helen stopped by today. His shoulders tensed. What did my mother want? The usual. Wondering when we're going to try for her precious grandson. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Funny timing, don't you think? He turned around, his expression hardening. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just wondering if maybe you've found someone else to give her what she wants. Jesus, Margot. He slammed the refrigerator door. You're turning a business dinner into some kind of soap opera. Is this because I've been working late? Because I'm trying to provide for our family? Are you providing for another family too? The words hung in the air between us. Something flickered across his face, guilt? Fear? Before he masked it with anger. I'm not having this conversation. He grabbed his keys. You're clearly not thinking straight. Where are you going? To a hotel. Call me when you're ready to be rational. I followed him to the front door. The girls will ask where you are in the morning. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Tell them. Tell them Daddy had an early meeting. Another lie to add to the pile? He didn't answer, just walked out into the night. I watched through the window as his car disappeared down our quiet suburban street. My phone buzzed. A text from Zoe, everything okay? You've been quiet all day. I started typing, deleted it, started again. How do you tell your best friend your marriage might be imploding? Before I could decide, another text came through from an unknown number. Ask him about the money. A friend. My hands shook as I read it twice, 3 times. The money? What money? Upstairs, I heard small footsteps. Mommy? Sophie stood at the top of the stairs in her unicorn pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I heard voices. Where's Daddy? I climbed the stairs and scooped her up, breathing in her sweet, clean scent. Daddy had to go to work early, sweetheart. Let's get you back to bed. But it's nighttime, she mumbled against my shoulder. I know, baby. I know. After tucking her back in beside her sleeping sister, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. If Liam was hiding something about money, there would be a trail. I just had to find it. The anonymous texter was right about one thing: this wasn't just about the woman in the photo. Something bigger was going on, and I was done being the trusting wife who looked the other way. 3 days of digging through bank statements and credit card bills left me with a migraine and a horrifying discovery. Our joint savings account, which should have held over $200,000, was nearly empty. The money had been bleeding out slowly over the past year, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, always in cash withdrawals. I was staring at the statements spread across my home office desk when Zoe walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "The girls are watching Frozen for the millionth time," she said, setting a cup beside me. "Now, what's so urgent that I had to come over at 8 in the morning?" I wordlessly pushed the bank statements toward her. Her eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. "Holy shit, Margot. Where's all this money going?" "I don't know." My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "But look at the pattern. The withdrawals always happen within days of his business trips to Chicago." Zoe sat down heavily. "Have you confronted him?" "He came home last night, grabbed some clothes, and left again. Says he needs space until I calm down about the photo." I laughed bitterly. "He doesn't know I've found this yet." My phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. "Check the safe in his office. Code is his mother's birthday." "Who keeps texting you?" Zoe peered at my phone. "I don't know, but they've been right so far." I stood up. "Watch the girls? I need to check something." Liam's home office was immaculate, as always. The safe was hidden behind a framed photo of our wedding day. My hands shook as I entered Helen's birthday, 0-6-1-9-6-3. The safe clicked open. Inside, I found a stack of papers that made my blood run cold. Loan agreements from places I'd never heard of. IOUs. A letter from something called Golden Palace Casino warning about outstanding debts. "Find anything?" Zoe appeared in the doorway. "He's gambling." The papers trembled in my hands. "He's gambling away our savings, Zoe. The girls' college fund." The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the office window, I saw Helen's Mercedes in our driveway. "Perfect timing," Zoe muttered. I shoved the papers back into the safe and hurried downstairs. Helen stood on our doorstep, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. "Where is he?" she demanded, pushing past me into the house. "He's not here." "What's wrong?" "Don't play dumb, Margot. George got a call from the bank this morning. Liam tried to take out a loan against their house." "Their house?" Her voice rose hysterically. "What has he done?" The twins appeared in the living room doorway, drawn by the commotion. Zoe quickly shepherded them back to their movie. "Helen, I think you should sit down." "I will not sit down. This is your fault. If you'd given him a son like I asked, he wouldn't be acting out like this." Something snapped inside me. "Acting out? Your precious son has gambled away our savings and is trying to steal from his own parents. But sure, blame me for not producing a male heir." Helen's face went white. "You're lying." I stormed to the office and returned with the papers from the safe, throwing them on the coffee table. "Am I?" As Helen sank onto the couch, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Liam. "We need to talk. Meeting Riley for lunch at Marino's. Come if you want the truth." My hands clenched around the phone. Riley. The woman from the photo. He was actually asking me to meet his mistress? "What is it?" Zoe asked, returning from checking on the girls. "He wants me to meet him. And her." I looked at Helen, still staring shell-shocked at the evidence of her son's deception. "You know what? I think I will." "Margot, wait," Zoe started. "No. I'm done waiting." I grabbed my keys. "Stay with the girls? This won't take long." As I drove toward Marino's, another text came through from my anonymous informant. "Be careful. There's more at stake than you know." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Whatever truth waited for me at that restaurant, I was ready for it. Or at least, I thought I was. Marino's was packed with the lunch crowd when I arrived. I spotted them immediately, Liam and the woman from the photo, sitting at a corner booth. She was even prettier in person, with an artistic flair that made my designer clothes feel suddenly stuffy and conventional. Riley stood as I approached, extending her hand. You must be Margot. I'm so sorry we're meeting like this. Her sincerity caught me off guard. I'd expected smugness or hostility, not this gentle awkwardness. Sit down, please, Liam said, his voice strained. We need to explain. Explain what? The gambling or the affair? I kept my voice low, conscious of nearby diners. Or maybe how you tried to take out a loan against your parents' house? Riley's head snapped toward Liam. What? You said the money was for our gallery. Our gallery. The words hit me like a slap. It is, Liam insisted, reaching for her hand. Margot, you don't understand. Riley and I have been planning to open an art gallery, she finished, pulling her hand away from his. With the investment money he promised. I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign. Investment money? Is that what he called it? Liam said he was investing his own money, Riley said slowly. From his real estate deals. There are no real estate deals. I pulled out the casino documents, sliding them across the table. Just gambling debts and empty accounts. Riley's face went pale as she read. These dates. This is when you said you were meeting investors in Chicago. I can explain everything, Liam started, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face went ashen. What now? I demanded. Nothing. Just work. He shoved the phone in his pocket, but not before I caught a glimpse of the text, payment due today or we go to the police. Show me the phone, Liam. This is ridiculous. I came here to explain about Riley, not to. The phone. My voice was steel. Now. A tense moment passed before he handed it over. The text was from someone named Marcus, last chance. Payment due today or we go to the police about the forged documents. What forged documents? Riley asked. Liam put his head in his hands. The loan applications. I used Dad's signature. The pieces clicked into place. That's why Helen came over. The bank called them about a loan they never applied for. I was desperate, Liam said. The casino was threatening to expose everything. I just needed time to make it right. By stealing from your parents? From our daughter's future? Riley stood abruptly, gathering her things. I can't. I need to go. Riley, wait, Liam reached for her, but she jerked away. Don't contact me again. She turned to me. I'm so sorry, Margot. I had no idea. After she left, Liam seemed to deflate. I love her, he said quietly. I know that's not what you want to hear, but... Stop. I held up my hand. The only thing I want to hear is how you plan to fix this before our daughters lose everything. I have a plan. A real estate deal that could. More lies? I stood up. You need help, Liam. Professional help. But I won't let you drag us down with you. My phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. Check your business accounts. Now. Cold dread washed over me as I opened my banking app. The furniture business account was empty. Every penny gone. What did you do? I whispered, showing him the screen. I was going to pay it back, he said desperately. Just give me one more chance. I walked out of Marino's without looking back, my mind racing. The business account had held nearly $500,000, money for payroll, vendors, operating costs. Money that wasn't just mine to lose. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed one final time. Now you know everything. What are you going to do about it? What indeed? I hadn't expected to find George Donovan sitting alone on my front porch when I got home. He looked older than I remembered, shoulders hunched under his worn blazer. Unlike Helen's dramatic entrance earlier, His quiet presence felt more ominous. "The girls are napping," Zoe said when I walked in. "Helen left about an hour ago." She was upset. "Her husband's outside." Zoe peered through the window. "Want me to stay?" I shook my head. "I need to handle this." George didn't look up as I sat beside him on the porch steps. We sat in silence until he finally spoke. "I knew about the gambling," he said quietly. "Years ago, before he met you. Had to bail him out twice in college." My hands clenched in my lap. "Why didn't you warn me?" "He promised he'd changed." "And Helen." He sighed heavily. "Helen wanted the marriage so badly. A proper daughter-in-law from a good family, someone to carry on the Donovan name. I was just a breeding mare to her, wasn't I? Helen's always been traditional. When you had girls instead of boys." He trailed off, looking ashamed. My phone buzzed. A text from my business partner: "Emergency meeting tomorrow. Vendors threatening legal action over bounced checks." "He took everything, George. Not just your money or our savings. My business account too." George pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Helen doesn't know I'm here. This is everything we have left in our retirement fund. About 50,000. I stared at the envelope. "I can't take that." "It's not for you." His voice cracked. "It's for my granddaughters. Helen. She'll never admit it, but she loves those girls. Even if they're not the grandsons she wanted." Before I could respond, Helen's Mercedes screeched into the driveway. She stormed up the path, face contorted with rage. "How dare you!" she shouted at George. I checked the account. "You withdrew everything." "Helen, please." "No." She turned on me. "This is your fault. You drove him to this with your career and your independence. A proper wife knows her place." The front door creaked open. Sophie and Lily stood there in their matching pajamas, eyes wide with fear. "Mommy?" Lily's voice trembled. "Why is everyone yelling?" "Girls, go back inside with Aunt Zoe," I said firmly, but Helen wasn't finished. "You see? You can't even control your own children." No wonder Liam needed to find comfort elsewhere. Something snapped inside me. Enough. I stepped between Helen and the girls. "You want to know why your precious son gambled away everything? Why he forged George's signature and emptied my business account? Because he's just like you, desperate to maintain an image that isn't real. How dare. No, how dare you come to my house and scream in front of my children? Your son stole from everyone who loved him, but somehow I'm to blame because I didn't give him a son?" George stood up. "Helen, we should go." "Not without that money." "It's gone," he said quietly. "I gave it to Margot for the girls." Helen's face went white. "You what?" "They're our grandchildren, Helen. Our only grandchildren. I want nothing to do with any of you," Helen spat, storming back to her car. "George, are you coming?" He hesitated, looking between his wife and his granddaughters. Something in his expression made my heart ache. "Go," I said softly. "But the girls' door will always be open for you." After they left, I found Zoe comforting the twins in the living room. Sophie looked up at me with Liam's eyes. "Is Daddy in trouble?" she asked. I sat down, pulling both girls onto my lap. "Yes, sweetheart. But I promise, I'm going to fix everything." My phone buzzed again, the anonymous texter: "There's one more thing you need to know. Check your email." Looking at my daughter's worried faces, I realized revenge wasn't enough anymore. I needed to protect what mattered most, no matter the cost. "Zoe," I said, "can you watch them a bit longer? There's something I need to do." The email from my anonymous informant contained a video. Security camera footage from the Golden Palace Casino, dated 3 months ago. I watched as Liam sat at a high-stakes poker table, Riley beside him, both laughing as he pushed stacks of chips forward. My business account chips, I realized with growing nausea. But it was the next clip that stopped my breath. Liam in a heated argument with a man in an expensive suit, Riley trying to pull him away. The timestamp matched the night of our daughter's 5th birthday party, the party he'd missed because of a work emergency. My phone rang. Riley's number. "I need to see you," she said without preamble. "There's something you should know." We met at a small coffee shop across town. Riley looked different, harder somehow, her artistic whimsy replaced by something darker. "I'm pregnant," she said as soon as I sat down. "And before you say anything, I didn't know about you or the girls when it started." "I swear." The world tilted sideways. "How far along?" 4 months. She pushed a folder across the table. "But that's not why I called. These are copies of everything, the loans, the gambling debts, the threats. I've been keeping records." "Why?" "Because I realized he was playing us both. The gallery was never real, it was just a way to explain where the money was going." She laughed bitterly. "I thought I was helping him invest in our future. Instead, I was helping him launder money from your business." My phone buzzed. A text from Zoe, "Where are you?" "Liam's here. He's drunk and demanding to see the girls." "I have to go," I stood up quickly. "My daughters." "There's one more thing." Riley grabbed my arm. "The man from the casino? He's coming for his money tonight. All of it." I rushed home to find Liam on my front lawn, shouting at my locked door while Zoe tried to reason with him. "Where are my daughters?" he slurred when he saw me. "Safe. Away from you. I'd asked my parents to take them for the night, thank God. You can't keep them from me. I'm their father. The father who stole their college fund for poker chips?" I held up my phone, showing the casino footage. "Or the father who missed their birthday to get in deeper with loan sharks?" He lunged for my phone, but Zoe stepped between us. "Leave, Liam, before I call the police." "Go ahead." He spread his arms wide, laughing manically. "Call them. Tell them how she's keeping my children from me. Tell them." A black SUV pulled up, and 2 men in suits stepped out. My blood ran cold as I recognized one from the casino video. "Mr. Donovan," the larger man said smoothly. "We need to discuss payment." Liam's face went ash white. "Marcus, please. I just need more time." "Time's up." Marcus nodded to his companion, who opened the SUV's back door. "Either we get our money now, or we take a ride to discuss alternatives." "I can get it," Liam said desperately. "Margot, the retirement money your father-in-law gave you." "Is gone," I lied, thinking of the envelope hidden in my desk. "I've already used it to save my business." "You bitch." He lunged at me again, but Marcus's partner caught him. "Wrong answer," Marcus said. "Let's go, Mr. Donovan." As they forced Liam into the SUV, he shouted, "This isn't over. Those are my daughters too." The SUV disappeared into the night, leaving me shaking on my front lawn. "Jesus, Margot," Zoe whispered. "What are you going to do?" My phone buzzed one final time. The anonymous texter, "Now you have a choice. Save him with George's money, or save your daughter's future. Choose wisely." I stared at the message, remembering Sophie and Lily's faces when they asked why Daddy missed their birthday. Remembering Helen's cruel words about proper wives. Remembering every lie, every betrayal, every moment I'd chosen to look the other way. "I'm going to do what I should have done months ago," I said, pulling out my phone to dial 911. "I'm going to protect what matters." But as I pressed the numbers, another text came through from Riley, "Don't call the police. There's something else you need to see first. Riley's text led me to a storage unit on the outskirts of town. She was already there, pacing nervously under the fluorescent lights. I followed him here last week, she said, rolling up the metal door. After I realized what he'd done with the gallery money. The unit was filled with furniture, my furniture. Pieces from my showroom that had mysteriously failed delivery over the past year. But it wasn't just furniture. There were boxes of financial documents, multiple phones, and a laptop. He was selling it all under the table, Riley said. The furniture, the gallery scheme, the gambling, it was all connected. Marcus isn't just a loan shark. He's part of something bigger. I picked up one of the phones. That's why you've been sending me anonymous texts. She nodded. When I figured it out, I knew I had to warn you. But carefully. These people. They're dangerous. Headlights swept across the storage unit. A black SUV pulled up. Right on time, Riley muttered. Marcus stepped out, followed by Liam and another man. When they saw us, Liam's face contorted with rage. You set me up, he snarled at Riley. No, I stepped forward. I did. The police are on their way. They're very interested in where all my inventory disappeared to. Marcus laughed. Police? You really think? I think the FBI is even more interested, I cut in, holding up my phone. Especially in your money laundering operation. My anonymous friend here has been very helpful with documentation. You stupid bitch, Liam lunged forward, but Marcus held him back. The money, Marcus said calmly. Where is it? Gone. Every penny you thought you could squeeze out of my business is gone. I met his eyes. I transferred it all back this morning. Turns out my bank was very understanding about fraud. You're lying. Check your accounts, Riley said. I helped her trace everything through the gallery records. It's over, Liam. Sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus's calm facade cracked. Get in the car, he ordered Liam. Now. No. Liam's voice shook. Margot, please. Think about the girls. They need their father. They need security and truth, I said. Two things you never gave them. He reached into his jacket. I'm not going to prison. Everything happened at once. Riley screamed as Liam pulled out a gun. Marcus and his man dove for their car. And I thought about my daughters, about the life I wanted for them, about the truth I needed them to understand someday. Shoot me then, I said quietly. Show them exactly who their father is. His hand trembled. In the distance, red and blue lights flashed. You ruined everything, he whispered. No, Liam. You did that all on your own. The gun clattered to the ground as police cars swarmed the storage unit. As officers rushed in, I watched them handcuff my husband, the father of my children, the man I'd once loved enough to build a life with. Agent Carter, one officer nodded to Riley. Good work. I turned to her in shock. She gave me a sad smile. I'm sorry for the deception, she said. We've been tracking this operation for months. Your husband's gambling debts gave us our way in. She touched her stomach gently. Some parts weren't an act, though. I thought about all her anonymous texts, how they'd led me here, how they'd helped me protect what mattered most. The girls, I said suddenly. I need to get to my girls. Go, Riley nodded. We'll need your statement tomorrow, but for now, go be with your daughters. As I drove home, my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number, you did good, Margot. Your daughters have quite a mother. I deleted the message, thinking about the story I'd someday tell Sophie and Lily. Not about revenge or betrayal, but about truth and strength, and how sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save us. 6 months later, I stood in my newly renovated showroom, watching Sophie and Lily chase each other between the furniture displays. The store's grand reopening was tomorrow, and despite everything, we'd survived. "No running, girls," I called out, though I couldn't help smiling. Their laughter echoed through the space, drowning out the lingering ghosts of the past year. The bell above the door chimed. George stood there, looking uncertain until the twins spotted him. "Grandpa." They rushed to hug him, and for a moment, I saw tears in his eyes. "I brought something," he said, pulling out a small package. "Found it while cleaning out the attic." Inside was a wooden music box, intricately carved. "Helen's grandmother made this," he explained. "For her first daughter. But she only had Liam, so." "It's beautiful," I said softly. "Helen wanted me to tell you she's sorry." He shifted uncomfortably. "She's been different since the trial." I nodded, remembering Helen's face in the courtroom as Liam was sentenced. 7 years for fraud and money laundering. The proud Donovan name, tarnished by her only son. "The girls miss her," I admitted. "They can visit if she'd like. But there need to be boundaries." "She understands." He watched the twins examining the music box. "You know, Liam asked to see them." My hands clenched instinctively. "What did you tell him?" "That it's not his choice anymore. That some privileges, once lost, have to be earned back." The bell chimed again. Riley walked in, her pregnancy now obvious beneath her flowing dress. "Sorry I'm late," she said. Morning sickness doesn't care about schedules. The FBI investigation had ended months ago, but Riley had stayed in town. We'd formed an unexpected friendship, bound by shared betrayal and eventual healing. "Aunt Riley." The girls abandoned the music box to greet her. They'd taken to her immediately, unaware of the complicated history between us. "I should go," George said. "Helen's waiting." He hesitated. "The music box. It should stay in the family. With them." After he left, Riley helped me arrange the final displays while the twins played nearby. "Have you decided what to tell them?" she asked quietly. "About their brother or sister?" I watched my daughters, so innocent and resilient. "The truth, eventually. That family isn't just about blood or names. It's about choices and trust. And second chances?" She touched her stomach meaningfully. "Some kinds," I agreed. "The earned ones." Later that night, as I tucked the girls into bed, Sophie asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mommy, is Daddy ever coming home?" I sat on the edge of their bed, choosing my words carefully. "No, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you." "Because he made bad choices?" Lily asked. "Yes. And sometimes, loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their choices. Like when we have to sit in timeout?" I smiled, stroking her hair. "Something like that." After they fell asleep, I found the envelope George had given me months ago, still unopened in my desk. The retirement money he'd tried to save us with. I'd never needed it. The business insurance and FBI recovery of assets had covered most losses. But I'd kept it, unsure why. Now I knew. Tomorrow, I'd open a new account, 2 actually, 1 for each girl. Not for college or emergencies, but for something more important, choices. So they'd always have the freedom to choose their own paths, unburdened by anyone else's expectations or mistakes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, not Riley this time, but someone new. "He's asking questions about the girls. Watch your back." I deleted it without responding. Whatever came next, we'd face it together, me and my daughters, stronger for what we'd survived, wiser for what we'd learned. The music box sat on their dresser, its melody faint but clear in the quiet room. Not a lullaby of revenge or regret, but of renewal. Of beginnings that come after endings, and the courage to choose them.
Pinching pennies like that just makes you look poor. When we got married, my husband used to praise me for being frugal and a good wife. But just 2 years later, he changed. You're too poor for me. I'm going to live with my wealthy lover, so let's get a divorce. I thought, is that so? How wealthy is this lover of yours? He seemed to think he was supporting me, but he was sorely mistaken. This actually made things easier for me. I would gladly get a divorce from him quickly. My name is Anna, and I just turned 30, a full-time homemaker. I met Ben, my husband, who is 2 years my senior, through a mutual friend 3 years ago. He made a strong approach, and we quickly started dating. After a year of dating, we got married. Back then, I was a receptionist at a major department store, and Ben worked for a large corporation. Although we didn't have a wedding ceremony, our marriage was envied by those around us. Upon getting married, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. Ben's mother was a homemaker who was good at saving money. And he wanted me to be always at home and manage our household efficiently. He had lived at home until our marriage and had never done housework. However, after marrying me, he did most of the cleaning and laundry because he didn't want my hands to get rough. He treated me like a princess and wanted to cherish me. He would even say, "Anna, please stay beautiful like this forever." I reciprocated his feelings by being diligent with savings and managing our finances well. A year into our marriage, we were blessed with a cute son. Ben took paternity leave and was actively involved in bathing and putting our son to sleep daily, earning him praise as a hands-on dad. To show our son in the future, he bought a diary made of high-quality paper to keep a parenting diary together. At first, he eagerly wrote about our parenting and our relationship. Although he stopped writing in the diary after about 6 months, I continued to keep it meticulously to show it to our son someday. Ben's attitude drastically changed around the time our son turned 1. Not only did he stop contributing to the parenting diary, but also he stopped doing the household chores he used to do voluntarily. Furthermore, he began to find fault with my parenting and housekeeping. Your cooking seems so poor. Dress him in better clothes. Our home feels so poor, it's depressing. Where did he go, who praised me for being good at saving money? Moreover, he started coming home late, and we rarely had dinner together as a family of 3. On holidays, he often went out alone. When asked where he was going, he said, "I have to go out because our home feels poor." Furthermore, he complained about our sons crying at night and kicked us out of the bedroom. Reluctantly, my son and I started sleeping in the living room. Eventually, he even stopped holding our son. One day, after sending him off to work and finishing cleaning and laundry, I was getting ready to take our son to the park. Then the doorbell rang. "Hello. I'm coming." I peered through the intercom and saw an unknown woman standing there. I regretted responding without checking who it was. But since I had already responded, I decided to go out. "Good morning. Do you know who I am?" The woman, decked out in brand-name clothes, spoke rudely. "I shouldn't know anyone like this." As I pondered, she began. "The answer is, I'm Ben's girlfriend." So this is your son. And you must be his wife." I was confused by the sudden encounter. I couldn't just believe what the woman who had appeared out of nowhere said. "I will discuss this with my husband, so please leave now." "Well, then, I'll wait until he comes back. If I leave it to him, it'll drag on." Insisting like this, she wouldn't leave. It was intolerable to keep discussing this at the doorstep. Reluctantly, I let the woman inside. I suppose you will want to break up after hearing my story. But well, you seem to have no money, and you have a baby. You won't let go of Ben, right? Just then, our son started crying. Since my son is crying, could you please leave? I asked her, but she seemed not to care at all and just kept talking. According to her, she was the same age as me and the daughter of some company president. She had fallen in love with Ben at first sight and had approached him herself. They had quickly fallen for each other. And it had been about 3 months since they started dating. It was really unbelievable that she barged in suddenly and kept talking despite the baby crying. I was dumbfounded, thinking, is this really how the daughters of company presidents behave nowadays? Do you know what Ben says about you? The woman wouldn't stop talking. I'm telling you what he said. Before marriage, even though you earned little, you were a beautiful receptionist he could boast about. But now you are a poor-looking old woman with no income, whom he can't introduce to anyone. The meals you cook are shabby. You insist on home caring your son until he's 3. Because you are an unemployed homemaker who can't afford daycare. You are just a parasite, using the child as an excuse not to work and leech off him. Do you want to hear more? That's enough. It seemed that Ben really was having an affair with this woman. Anyway, I'll discuss this with my husband. I pushed the woman out the door. Divorce him quickly, will you? Oh, and you can keep that crybaby. She threw out as a parting shot and finally left. What an awful situation. Troublesome father, isn't he? I muttered while comforting my son. Late at night, my husband Ben returned home. There's something I need to talk about. What is it? I'm tired. If it's about parenting, complain somewhere else. His reply was typically dismissive. Today, your girlfriend came to our house. Hearing this, Ben's face went pale instantly, and he started to get agitated. But he soon brazened it out and threatened. I'm the one earning the money here. I don't mind if we get divorced. A poor person like you can't survive without me. You're already overwhelmed with childcare, so there's no way you can work and raise a child. Even if you worked, your skills wouldn't be enough to support a child. It would be difficult for you. Basically, you should be grateful that a high-earning, highly educated genius like me would have you as a wife, who is only good-looking and incompetent. Oh, but now you look like an old lady. He continued to belittle me, ignoring his own infidelity. His words hurt me more than his affair. How did I ever marry such a man, and why did I devote myself to him? The only solace was my adorable son. From that day on, Ben blatantly kept in touch with his mistress, even going on trips with her. The mutual friend who introduced us to each other tried to persuade him to stop the affair. But he wouldn't listen. Even our friend was utterly dismayed by how infatuated Ben was with her. Eventually, Ben even stopped giving the monthly $1,000 he had been contributing to household expenses. Meanwhile, I was so worn out from parenting and stress that I fell ill. My son was still young and the house was a mess. Nevertheless, my husband, unconcerned, continued to spend time with her. Unable to expect any help from my husband, I used local childcare support and domestic help services to manage. Upon learning this, Ben said, "You're using community services instead of just hiring a babysitter or maid. Always scrimping and saving, it's so poor looking." At last, any remaining feelings I had for him were gone. I was starting to think about when to bring up divorce. Seeing me disheveled from childcare and looking at me as if I were something dirty, Ben said. What's with that damaged hair? Can't you even take care of your hair? You're now a failure as a woman. I guess it's impossible. A poor person like you is no match for me. I'm going to live with my wealthy mistress, so let's get a divorce. She doesn't want the child, so you can have him. Saying this, he handed me the divorce papers. I had been waiting for this. I was internally overjoyed to avoid the hassle of initiating and the custody battle. With pleasure. Taking the divorce papers, I urged him to see the lawyer with me right away. Really? Is that okay? What? You're the one who brought it up, let's go now. Ben seemed to have thought I would be flustered. But seeing me prepared and spirited, he looked surprised. On the way back from law office, he said, I think my parents will want to see the child, so let's set up visits once a month. I'm starting a new family, so I don't really need to see him myself. I'll give you child support during the visits. How about $100 per month until he's 18? That should be enough for a poor person's son. I'm thinking about you properly even though we're getting divorced. I'm a kind person, right? His offer for child support was significantly below the standard rate. I was astounded at his ignorance or stinginess. It was unexpected that he would bring up child support himself. But I planned to demand property division as well, so he should be prepared. After getting home, I immediately began preparing to move out. While I was packing with my son, Ben spoke up. A jobless single mother can't pay rent, right? Can you even rent a place? You have no family to go back to. I'll be living in a huge apartment with my mistress. I'm canceling this house's lease by the end of the month. As a last act of mercy to a poor person like you, I'll send your belongings. You're probably moving to a rundown apartment near a supermarket, so leave your new address. I silently placed a paper with the address on the desk and left the house. A few days later, despite being out of state, Ben came to my new home with the movers. He seemed to have come to identify the place under the guise of guiding the movers, as the address was different from what he had expected. What? Why are you living here? Did you find a new man? My new residence was in an area known locally for its wealthy mansions. My father had died from an illness when I was young, and my mother raised me alone until she followed him 3 years later. Afterward, my maternal grandparents raised me. My grandmother passed away when I was 20. My grandfather, a well-known wealthy man, died 2 years before I married Ben. My mother was an only child, and I was the only grandchild for my grandparents. Thus, I inherited all of their assets. It's my own house. It was vacant because I was living out of state with you. Including other properties, my assets amount to about only $13 million. But I haven't been able to manage properly. Like you said, I'm just a parasitic poor person. So it's not as grand as you and your mistress's home, but it's a comfortable house. I said this sarcastically. Ben couldn't hide his shock and blurted out. What? Explain this to me. Thinking it a waste of time and energy to explain to this man, I remained silent. Then he said, that means it's part of my assets too, right? I should have rights to half, even after the divorce. It's joint property, so give me half, whether it's money or land. I was completely disgusted. Since it's premarital property, it doesn't count as joint property. I thought you, being highly educated and a genius, would know that. Who put such foolish thoughts in your head? You're pretty, so it must be your new boyfriend, right? Must be a lawyer. As I remained silent in dismay, he continued with more absurd statements. Finally, I said, I'm not relying on anyone, but I thought that statement was common sense. I did attend law school, so I have a bit of knowledge, though it's all quite basic. Ben then shouted. What? I thought you were just a high school grad. I never heard about this. You traitor. You seem to make decisions based on assumptions, maybe you've just assumed all along. And if anyone deserves to be called a betrayer, isn't it you who cheated? I responded calmly. What's with that way of talking? So you're rich, huh? Give me back the moving expenses. Pay for our moving expenses too, as compensation. As you previously said, I am just a poor person with only $13 million in assets. I can't compare to your wealthy mistress. So, as planned, I will rely on your mercy for the moving expenses. And I need to know what the compensation is for before I can pay it. I replied with a sarcastic tone. Unable to respond, he muttered to himself and left. The next day, he called me, in a panicked voice. What's going on? Why is the cancellation fee for the house amounting to $10,000? That's 2 months' rent. Why is the rent $5,000 a month? It's a detached house in a high-end residential area. Didn't you ever wonder? It was my house. But a month before our divorce, I transferred the ownership to someone else and we've been renting it under your name. You left the house matters to me, and you initiating the divorce really helped me out. It seems that Ben, who had always lived in his parents' home, had no idea about rent or even how much living costs. So I was living in your house and being supported by you. Even over the phone, I could sense his shock. A few days later, Ben called me again, in a flustered tone. Hey. What's this about $800 for child support and property division? You're rich, so you don't need it, right? He said. In fact, while preparing for the divorce, I had been gathering evidence of his verbal abuse and his failure to provide living expenses. The luxury diary Ben had prepared had, unbeknownst to him, become a record of our child's growth and also a record of his abusive behavior. This was also a key piece of evidence. Furthermore, I had hired a private investigator to obtain evidence of his infidelity. With a lawyer, I demanded a hefty sum for both his abuse and infidelity. At first, I hadn't planned to request child support. However, I am unemployed despite having assets, and I thought it was right for him, as a father, to contribute to his son. Thus I requested child support as well. Ben also said, "You must be dating that lawyer." Impossible. The lawyer I hired was a woman. Ben's assumptions were pitifully wrong. All I could do was laugh. Then, the investigation by the private investigator uncovered something even more shocking. That so-called president's daughter, Ben's mistress, was actually a marriage scam artist. Her story of being a president's daughter was a complete lie. She had tricked him into covering all her debts under the pretense that her father, supposedly the president, would pay him back as a wedding gift. And then she disappeared without a trace. Ben was in a panic. And now, with no money left, Ben said, "Let me stay until I find the next house." Then he added something ridiculous. "You own some apartments, right? Give me one for free. Out of consideration for us being ex-spouses." As the saying goes, a barking dog seldom bites. Ben kept barking. Realizing it was futile to respond, I listened silently until the end and then said, I believe you've received the notice, but I have retained a lawyer. It's problematic for you to contact me this way. Please communicate through the lawyer from now on. If you wish to have visitation with your son, please file for visitation mediation. Then I hung up. After that, I blocked all phone calls, emails, and other communications. It was a relief not to hear his nonsense and complaints. 3 years after the divorce, there has been no contact from him wishing for visitation. Honestly, I am relieved. I never want my son to meet his father or his family and relatives. The risk of kidnapping or Ben's traits of making assumptions passing on to my son is too troublesome. I never want to see, or have my son see, or interact with Ben again. Even now, I hear about him through mutual friends. Apparently, Ben lost all his assets, and with the child support and property division payments. He is living an uncomfortable life at his parents' house. His tendency to jump to conclusions caused trouble at work, leading to his dismissal. Now, he works tirelessly day and night at a low-paying job. Despite all he said about my looks, his hair is unkempt, and his shirts are always wrinkled. Meanwhile, I have built a new house and am living there with my son. Since Ben knew about the mansion, I sold it and built a new house on completely different land. I've managed to properly invest the other assets I had left unattended. And now I'm earning an income from them. I cherish every moment with my son as he grows, enjoying our days together. Also, coinciding with my son's entry to kindergarten, I re-enrolled in the law school. I had given up when I was younger, but now I'm working hard every day to become a lawyer. I'm using the money from Ben for my tuition. I want to become a reliable woman like my impressive lawyer who helped me. And to make my son proud of me. There's still so much life ahead. I have erased my ex-husband from my memory and plan to enjoy life with my wonderful son. You can't even do housework, you're useless. Pay me the property division too. As soon as he entered the hospital room, David half smiled and said this to me. Connected to many tubes. A girl I didn't know was standing beside him. David doesn't know that my total assets amount to $9 million. He should understand that getting a divorce in this situation is a matter of life and death for me as a housewife. Fine. Here, take the divorce papers. Yet, here he was, verbally abusing his wife in such a state. I, who had been carrying the divorce papers as a charm, pulled them out of the drawer and handed them to David. David smirked as he took them. This is goodbye. Then, I'm going to be happy with her, don't worry. Right, Sherry? David said this and put his arm around the girl's waist. The girl, called Sherry, leaned on David while scoffing at me. Ma'am. Oh, you're not a ma'am anymore. Take care, old lady. With those words as their cue, the two of them laughed and left the hospital room. However, their fun is only for now. Left alone in the hospital room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers will be processed on Monday. Oh, I'm looking forward to 3 days from now. My name is Amy Gale. I am a 45-year-old housewife. My parents run an ordinary farm, and while I don't have any remarkable skills, I can proudly say that I have a wide repertoire of cooking. My husband David is the same age, and we were university classmates. Both of us had come from the countryside to New York, and since we both lived alone, I used to cook various dishes for David using vegetables and rice sent from home because he couldn't cook. People often said I had captured his heart through his stomach, and I was aware of it. David couldn't do any housework at all, and I had been taking care of him since our dating days. Because of that, I have been doing all the housework since we got married. Unfortunately, we were not blessed with children, but we enjoyed our life together as a couple. We both loved to eat, and on David's days off, we would go on little trips, driving around to eat delicious food. David was kind during the early years of our marriage, but about 3 years later, he became a typical authoritarian husband. Though he never resorted to physical violence, his way of speaking became harsh. And he would frequently say, "Who do you think is paying for this life?" It would be a lie to say his words didn't hurt, but even if I asked him to stop, he wouldn't listen, and I didn't have the energy to fight back. Being a housewife made me feel inferior, and I couldn't assert myself. After graduating from university, David joined a renowned company but resigned after about 5 years. He found a new job quickly but kept resigning after short periods. Because of this, our income was unstable, and I researched ways to save money to get by, though it was often hard to cover the living expenses. However, he has been getting along with his colleagues at the company. He started working at 2 years ago, and I was harboring a faint hope that he might stay there for a long time. Then one day, David came home earlier than usual. "I'm home. I quit my job again." "What, again?" My surprised response made David's eyebrows twitch. I hurriedly stopped what I was doing in the kitchen and ran to him. "I'm sorry. I was just surprised." No welcome or words of appreciation, just criticizing what your husband does. "You've become quite something." David's words made me tense up. He was in a very bad mood today. If I said something wrong, it could lead to serious trouble. "I'm sorry. As long as you understand." It seemed that my apology had somewhat eased his irritation. David, still openly grumpy, sat down on the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly placed a beer and a glass on the table. "Would you like to eat, or would you like a bath?" "Food, and more drinks." "Understood." I continued to play the role of a submissive wife, not to upset David's mood. The real me used to be more assertive. But over the 14 years of being with David since we married at 28, I had almost completely stopped expressing myself. David filled his stomach with alcohol and snacks and fell asleep on the sofa, snoring. The table was so messy it looked like a child had eaten there. And I cleaned up the fallen beer bottles and food scraps from the floor. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Remembering the happy marriage I had dreamed of as a young girl, my true feelings slipped out. I glanced at David, but there was no sign he would wake up. I sighed in relief, yet I was terrified that this life would continue. Maybe it's time to consider a divorce. I started to face the problems I had been avoiding, and organized my schedule for the following days in my head. David began visiting the employment office the next day and quickly secured another job. While he was job hunting at the employment office, I went to the municipal office and got a divorce form, signing it on the spot. I wasn't planning to submit it yet, but I thought I'd keep it as a charm. The signed divorce form was hidden at the bottom of my usual bag. If discovered, I couldn't imagine what would be said. "Hey, where were you loitering while I was job hunting?" "I went to buy a resume at the stationery store." "Look, I thought you might need it." "Is that so?" "Unusually thoughtful of you." David, who had returned home before me, initially questioned me suspiciously but soon cheered up. I handed him the resume I had pre-purchased. After receiving it, David said he was going out for drinks with a friend and left. David's new job was at a solid company with better salary and benefits than any of his previous workplaces. After working for about 3 years and getting promoted, I was secretly hoping that David might finally stay with this job until retirement. as he seemed happy drinking in the evenings. It seems that David's department is in sales, and he often leaves home saying he has client dinners at night. I took full advantage of the brief moments of freedom to refresh myself and welcomed David home with a smile. One day, I received a call from my mother for the first time in a while. After listening to her excited story, I was shocked. $9 million. Yes, $9 million. The mountains and lands we originally owned. You don't need them anymore, right? When we had them appraised, they were worth $10 million. We can enjoy our retirement with just $1 million. So, I think you should consider restarting your life. My mother never thought highly of David, and since his domineering behavior worsened, she was worried about me not being able to visit my parents' home. I was surprised by the huge amount. Moreover, it seems my mother had transferred it to my name when she inherited it from my grandmother. And I was even more surprised to hear that there would be no inheritance tax. You better not tell David. But my mother, sensing my hesitation, said, "The final decision is yours," and hung up the phone. I knew I should report it immediately. Part of me thought that with this money, I could live freely, while another part wasn't ready to decide. About a week later, I had a traffic accident. Fortunately, the injuries were not life-threatening, but I needed to stay in the hospital for about a week. After storing my valuables in the hospital room's drawer, I immediately contacted David. "I'm sorry, I got injured." What about my dinner? While I felt like sighing at David worrying more about his meal than my injury, I continued talking. "It looks like I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. Sorry, but could you buy your meals somewhere until I'm discharged? Can't even prepare a meal for your husband, what a lazy wife." "Oh, wait, I'm coming over now." David said this and abruptly hung up the phone. I had intended to tell him about the inheritance tonight, but maybe it's better not to mention it. Looking at the many tubes attached to me during a precautionary checkup, I somehow felt that was the right decision. And soon, I would feel the correctness of that decision painfully. A wife who can't even do housework is useless. Pay me the property division too. As soon as he entered the hospital room, David said this to me, half smiling while I was connected to many tubes. A girl I didn't know was standing beside him. David doesn't know about my total assets of $9 million. He should understand that getting a divorce in this situation is a matter of life and death for me as a housewife. Fine. Here, take the divorce papers. Even so, I wouldn't want a man who verbally abuses his wife in such a state. I pulled the divorce papers I had been keeping as a charm from the drawer and handed them to David. David smirked as he received them. "This means goodbye. Then, I'm going to be happy with her, so don't worry. Right, Sherry?" David said this and put his arm around the girl's waist. The girl, called Sherry, leaned on David while scoffing at me. "Ma'am." "Oh, you're not a ma'am anymore. Take care, old lady." With those words as their cue, the two of them laughed and left the hospital room. However, their fun is only for now. Left alone in the hospital room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers will be processed on Monday. Oh, I'm looking forward to 3 days from now. As I expected, there was no contact from David over the weekend, and it was very peaceful. The situation of not having to do anything since getting married made me restless, and the nurses kept telling me to rest. Then on Monday evening, my cell phone was flooded with calls from David. At first, I ignored it, but after 30 minutes of non-stop ringing, I got fed up and decided to answer. "Hey, you're being persistent with the calls. Hey. What is this about?" As soon as I picked up the phone, David started yelling. I couldn't help but laugh. David seemed infuriated by my laughter, half crazed, shouting something. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. The divorce papers haven't been processed. David was fuming on the other end of the phone. I kept giggling and responded to his complaints. Oh, I filed a non-acceptance notice before. Remember? You used to say let's divorce whenever we fought. I thought it wouldn't be right if you filed the divorce papers just on the spur of the moment. Ugh. No, but I don't need it anymore. Withdraw it right now. David hesitated for a moment but soon ordered again. However, I'm no longer just going to listen to what David says. I can't do it until I'm discharged. It requires paperwork at the city office. Then get discharged now. Don't be unreasonable. His selfish demands only made me laugh even more. He probably plans to register his marriage with Sherry, whom he brought on Friday. David was clearly panicking. Oh, by the way, was her name Sherry? She's your mistress, right? Hey, that's rude to Sherry. Apologize. She's my new wife. Since we're not divorced yet, she's technically still a mistress. When I calmly responded to David's nonsensical remarks, he groaned oddly. I pressed on further. By the way, I'll have my lawyer contact you about the property division and compensation later.
Yeah.
Compensation. I'll make sure you pay for all this hassle. David seemed to misunderstand something and suddenly became cheerful. Normally, the person at fault pays compensation. I've always taken care of the household properly, and of course, I've never committed any acts of infidelity. It's clear that David is the responsible party. What are you misunderstanding? You're the one who should be paying compensation. Huh? David genuinely seemed not to understand, replying in a confused tone. He probably believes that by not taking care of him while I'm hospitalized, I am the one at fault. Even in the early era, being hospitalized wouldn't count as fault. I thought bitterly to myself as I patiently explained. What fault of mine? Just so you know, being unable to do household chores because I'm hospitalized does not constitute fault. You're neglecting to take care of me. If you were a child, this might be considered neglect. But you're an adult, capable of taking care of yourself. That's why this doesn't count as fault. If I say it's your fault, then it's your fault. Such childlike logic would surprise even a judge, I thought, as I metaphorically fell over in my mind. Had I really been so underestimated? As I remained silent, David said, "Finally got it, huh?" in a tone that made me bristle. Irritated, I responded. Don't you know the law? Fault is defined by specific reasons. Like infidelity, that is, having another woman despite having a wife. That's why Sherry is my new wife, and you're just an old tool, so it doesn't apply, does it? What are you talking about? Since you dated her secretly from me, it's clearly infidelity. David seemed unconvinced. He appeared determined not to change his attitude, convinced of his own righteousness. Anyway, please communicate through the lawyer from now on. Goodbye. Hey, Amy. I hung up without listening to David's protests. He called multiple times after that, but I ignored him until he finally gave up. Relieved, I thought I was done with him, but the next day it brought a new headache. Exasperated by the non-stop ringing of the phone from 9 a.m., I pressed the call button. On the other side, David was rattling off complaints like a machine gun. I couldn't fully grasp what he was saying, but it seemed to be about being unable to withdraw money from the account. If it was a joint account, David should have been able to withdraw without a problem. But if not, I remembered the bank card and passbook I had left at home and asked David, "Did you try to take money out of my account?" Yes. You're still hospitalized. So I thought I'd take the money in your account as compensation, but the card doesn't work. David was furiously ranting with his irrational claim. It seemed he hadn't understood what I had said yesterday. When I was determined to be hospitalized for a week, I had called the bank to make sure no withdrawals could be made from my account until I handled it in person after discharge. This was to prevent David from squandering the savings while I was away. And my decision was proving to be correct. After all, it's unthinkable to try to take money from an ex-wife's account without consent. However, David didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with his plan. And he demanded that I make the withdrawal possible immediately. What are you saying? We're strangers now. Why would I do as you say? You. What a person. Even if we say we're getting a divorce, the fact that you were my wife doesn't change. Act like a wife should and listen. We're practically strangers now, even if the divorce papers haven't been filed yet. Do you understand? Unfortunately, I don't have money to give to a stranger. Since I had never been so defiant before, David was shocked on the other end of the phone. But he quickly returned to his domineering tone. Just do as I say. Hurry up and send the money. Pay me compensation for not doing the housework. David had been considered smart when we first met, but sadly, he seemed to have intelligence without common sense. After 17 years of marriage, it was clear I had misjudged him, and I was exasperated. David seemed frustrated that I was not agreeing. Likely, he had run out of cash on hand and tried to tap into the household funds and the joint account. I spoke to him as if he were a small child. Listen, I'm no longer your obedient wife. The property division will be handled through a lawyer later. What? How dare you? I'm coming over now, wait for me. David said this and hung up. I didn't mind if he came to the hospital. But I had already asked the nurse station to let no one but my parents visit. Therefore, it was unlikely that David would make it to my room. David really did come to the hospital, but as expected, he was stopped at the nurse station. The phone rang repeatedly, but I ignored it until it switched to messages. And the screen was filled with a flood of notifications. I saved all of these as evidence and contacted the lawyer. After a while, the lawyer must have contacted David because the messages stopped coming. I thought this was the end, but I was soon proven wrong. The day before my discharge, a nurse came to me with a visitor request. A Miss Kathy Brown would like to visit you. What would you like to do? Kathy? Please let her in. Kathy was a friend I shared hobbies with. During my single days, she responded to my SNS posts about our food adventures. And we became friends because we lived nearby and often went out to eat together. After marriage, I had to cut back on such outings. But we kept in touch by having coffee and chatting regularly. Amy, are you okay? How's your injury? Yes, it's much better now. Thank you. Kathy expressed her concern as soon as she entered the room, warming my heart. Thinking back, since being hospitalized, I realized no one but my parents and hospital staff had shown concern for me. Amy, isn't this a really tough time for you? Why? I haven't told anyone but my parents about my situation. So why does Kathy know? I was very curious and asked her. Then Kathy said something surprising. Wasn't Sherry Hansen, that young girl, having an affair with your husband? What? How do you know that? Wait, you know her? Actually, she's my niece. Kathy answered hesitantly, and I was speechless. I couldn't believe Kathy was Sherry's aunt. The room fell silent. It was the first time it had been quiet around Kathy, and it felt incredibly uneasy. Kathy was the first to break the silence. You see, Sherry suddenly told her mother she was getting married. And the man is 45 years old. Her mother was shocked. When she showed her mother his picture, it was your husband, Amy. I was so surprised. I've already told her. Amy, I'm really sorry my niece has caused you such trouble. Don't apologize, Kathy, it's not your fault. Kathy looked like she was about to cry as she looked at me. I thought for a moment and then asked Kathy. I plan to ask for compensation from Sherry as well. I can't compromise on that. But I wonder, does this mean our friendship is over? Not at all. I want to keep being friends with you, Amy. I'll make sure Sherry pays the compensation. Both her mother and I can't forgive what she's done. We'll keep a close eye on her. I was very grateful for Kathy's words. Kathy and I have been friends for over 20 years. I don't want to lose a precious friend because of my awful husband and his affair. I told Kathy about a meeting planned for tomorrow and that I wanted her to come. Kathy happily agreed. And she even offered to provide photos that could serve as evidence of the affair. The next day, right after being discharged, I went to a private restaurant with my lawyer, where David and Sherry had already arrived, gorging on expensive French cuisine. I was speechless at their self-centeredness, and David smirked at me. Finally showed up. Did you bring the money? You're paying for this too. David continued to eat as he spoke to me. Sherry also kept eating, smirking alongside him. I decided to fight back. Please handle the payment yourselves. Also, I'm here to demand compensation from both of you. How long are you going to sulk? You're really not cute. Ignoring David's rude remarks, my lawyer and I sat down and showed evidence that David was at fault. We presented legal documents about fault and materials about compensation and asset division. Lastly, I showed the photos Kathy had given me of Sherry and David entering a hotel with another man Sherry didn't know. What? Why? Hey. Sherry, what is this? David and Sherry were unsettled by the photos, and they finally stopped eating. Just then, Kathy entered at the perfect moment. I took those photos. Kathy. Sherry seemed confused to see her aunt here. Then Kathy coldly looked down at Sherry and David and spoke calmly about wanting them to realize how low their actions were. Also, Sherry. You said you were pregnant with his child. But with this behavior, it's unclear whose child it is. No, I mean. Sherry faltered at Kathy's comment. It was the first time I heard she was pregnant, and looking at her today, I wouldn't have guessed she was. But from David's reaction, it seemed she had indeed claimed to be pregnant. So you are pregnant. In that case, we will proceed with a DNA test and then add that to the compensation. No, please. I lied about being pregnant, I'm sorry. Sherry suddenly confessed and apologized. She had been looking for an older man who would provide money, and David had been her target. He bought her brand items, and said once they were married, she wouldn't have to work and could do whatever she liked. So she thought she could be a housewife and casually see other men as she pleased. She lied about being pregnant because he showed no signs of actually divorcing. David just gaped, stunned. I'm really sorry. But I can't pay any compensation. I don't have the money. I'll pay Amy first. You will work part-time every month and pay me back. No playing around until you've paid it all back. No way. Sherry looked utterly defeated. Kathy said she would bring her sister to apologize again later and led Sherry out of the restaurant. David, who had been in a daze, suddenly tried to sweet-talk me. Hey, it seems I was deceived. I can't live without you, Amy. We still have the divorce papers here, can't we start over? You've been a housewife all this time, you can't start working now, can you? I listened to David's plea with a cold gaze, but none of his words touched me. After he finished, I responded with a smile. I can live quite well without you. So I'll take the divorce papers now and file them right after this. Also, I haven't told you yet, but my total assets are currently $9 million. So, I can live comfortably until my old age without working, please don't worry. $9 million. Why didn't you tell me about that kind of money? I was going to tell you, but you started shouting about divorce. I'll definitely demand compensation. And this money is my personal inheritance, so it's not subject to division of property. It has nothing to do with you, right? David looked at me with a look of despair. My lawyer quickly handed him the documents and a pen to sign. After that, my lawyer and I left and immediately filed the divorce papers. Thus, a chapter of about 20 years of marriage came to an end. Later, the compensation was transferred to me in Sherry's name in one lump sum. Kathy told me that Sherry's mother, having learned of the situation, was furious. She had Sherry take a break from university to work at a relative's inn without break until she repaid the compensation. As for David, his in-laws disowned him after learning about the divorce. They told him they wouldn't help at all, and he reluctantly took out a loan and paid it off all at once. It also came out that he had been going to the hotel with Sherry during work hours. He was fired from his job and is now working multiple jobs on construction sites to pay off his debts. As for me, even though I came into a significant sum, I didn't know what to do with it and donated half to charity. With the remaining money, I moved to the countryside and am enjoying a luxurious single life. Kathy and I continue to interact, and on days off, we go out to eat or take little trips. Since we both planned to remain single, I suggested perhaps we should share a room. Initially hesitant, Kathy couldn't resist the lure of shared mail orders and my cooking, and she agreed. Next week, we'll start moving, and I'm excited about the new life ahead. From now on, I want to live honestly and enjoy myself. I'm moving in with my lover starting tomorrow. Old hag, get out of my house. I was dumbfounded, looking at the two of them. I knew about Brandon's infidelity. He was always someone who had a tendency to cheat. But, I never thought he would say he wanted to divorce me. I look at the face of his affair partner. Young and attractive. Exactly Brandon's type of woman. I wonder, why did Brandon ever marry me? He likes young, beautiful women. He prefers someone with a polished look. What could be the reason he chose an older, plain woman like me as his wife? Money, perhaps. I was sighing. And for Brandon, I must be of no use anymore. If that's the case, it can't be helped. I thought, Brandon, I've been pushed around by your selfishness for so long. But now I'm freed from that role. If so, I might as well do as I please. My name is Sarah Turner. 35 years old. It might sound odd to say this myself, but the company I work for is one of the leading corporations in the country. And I hold a managerial position within the company. My husband Brandon works as a model. He has also been called for dramas and movies at times. We were seen as the ideal couple, envied by everyone, and have been featured in the local newspapers several times. But that's a thing of the past. We got married 4 years ago. During that time, Brandon's peak as a model had passed. His acting wasn't well received either, and no further offers came. What Brandon was left with were just his habits of flashy nightlife and bad relationships with women. Sarah being a manager? You must be joking. When I shared the news of my promotion, what I faced was Brandon's mocking smile. Despite being younger, Brandon uses formal language with me. He says that if he doesn't stay conscious of it, his language gets rough even during work. For Brandon, who markets his gentle personality, it's important. However, the last time Brandon was called for a modeling job at the workplace was almost 2 months ago. It's true you might be competent at your job, but a woman being entrusted with such a major role. Sorry, but it's true. It can't be helped. The previous manager had to leave the company due to a stomach ailment. That explains it. Explaining this, Brandon finally seemed convinced. He still doesn't think I was chosen for my skills. What underlies his thoughts is his own inferiority as a model on the decline. Since his own career isn't going well, he can't genuinely accept my success. When Brandon first debuted, he was on the rise so fast that it seemed like he could shoot down flying birds. At the age of 20, he was chosen as the lead in a movie. With his neat looks and polite manners, his popularity among women was extremely high. In fact, I was also one of his fans. I used to collect the magazines he appeared in. And the DVDs of the movies he starred in are still my treasures. Then, by a strange twist of fate, we met and he confessed to me. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. Above all, I was happy. Because I had become lovers with the Brandon I admired. Perhaps that time was the most fulfilling period for us. I guess overtime will increase too, huh? It's okay. I manage my schedule in advance. So I'll make extra food the day before overtime. I've never neglected housework no matter how busy I was. That was my pride. And it will continue to be. I will live wearing 2 hats, a housewife and a manager. I didn't intend to do either halfway. Any requests for dinner tonight? Beef stew would be nice. It's getting cold these days. Saying so, Brandon shrugged his shoulders. The season is mid-November. The cold north wind will soon begin to blow. Brandon, who is sensitive to cold, was wearing thick, fluffy clothes over his tall frame. Even in a heated room, he was wearing gloves. I don't have any meat though. Then you should go buy some. And while you're at it, please pick up some alcohol and potato chips as well. Saying that, Brandon lay down on the sofa. Apparently, he has no intention of accompanying me shopping. Reluctantly, I prepared alone and got into the car. After finishing shopping and returning home, Brandon was lying down in the same posture as before I left. When I approached, he lazily sat up. You're late. Sorry, I'll make it now. I was about to start cooking when the doorbell rang. As my eyes widened, Brandon said with a smile. You were so late that I ended up ordering pizza. Late. The roads were busy. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to eat pizza, so no need for the stew anymore. That's. I looked down at the shopping bags I was holding. That's how Brandon is. Brandon, who has been pampered by those around him since his youth, lacks cooperation. Furthermore, what was Brandon doing while I was away? He didn't have any work scheduled today. That means he was free all day. He does go to a part-time job a few days a week, but even this doesn't last long. Being treated as a washed-up model, he gets indignant claiming he's still active, causing trouble with his colleagues. Nowadays, Brandon spends most of his day playing social games. Missed it again. All my allowance this month went to the game lots. Try to keep the spending in moderation, okay? Yeah. Sure. Although he nods, Brandon is not really remorseful. I give him a monthly allowance of $200, but often he needs more and asks for additional funds. Brandon's own income is unstable, and even if he does earn some, he spends it all on himself. Mostly on nights out with his model friends. And next on expensive personal clothes and accessories. Please don't be so mad. I'm not mad, but... Sensing something from my expression, Brandon came closer. He stood up from the sofa and tried to hug me. I actually prefer your cooking, you know? The food you work hard to make for me, it's definitely delicious. But, I got hungry.
Haha.
I slipped out of Brandon's arms. Anyway, let's eat pizza together. Have some drinks too. I still have work to do, so I can't join you for drinks. That's too bad. Brandon pursed his lips. Because of this closeness, I noticed. I twitched my nose. What's this smell? Eh? What do you mean? Your clothes smell like perfume. You must be imagining things. Let's eat quickly. Okay. Prompted by Brandon, I sat down on the chair and had dinner. During that time, I kept thinking about the source of the smell coming from Brandon's clothes. Asking Brandon directly wouldn't yield any answers. Could he be hiding something? I couldn't help but suspect. After dinner, I moved to the study and the unease didn't leave me. I sat frozen in front of the computer. This shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't affect my work. Above all, I hate leaving anything halfway done. Later, I carefully bought a listening device without Brandon noticing. It pained my conscience, but it had to be done. I needed Brandon to prove his innocence through his own actions. I thought so because, at this point, I suspected him of cheating. Brandon has always had a problem with fidelity. He has cheated in the past and each time, he has come crying for forgiveness. Reluctantly, I forgave him each time. And just when I thought he had gotten over this bad habit. Oh no. Missed again. Brandon had been hanging out at the casinos. I knew he spent money on mobile games. But I never expected him to be gambling elsewhere too. When I retrieved the listening device and checked the recordings, I was speechless. His infidelity was confirmed. After leaving the store, instead of coming home, he rode his bicycle somewhere. Brandon was humming a tune. He never hums when he's with me. The sound of steps going upstairs. The doorbell rings, and a door opens. A young woman's voice is heard. You're late, Brandon. Sorry. I couldn't bear to listen to the conversation that followed. The two of them exchanged words in a way that seemed too close. And soon the sound of rustling clothes followed. I was struggling to suppress the nausea that surged within me. Brandon. As I muttered, tears overflowed from my eyes. Thinking about it, Brandon always uses formal language with me. Isn't that a sign of him being considerate? To consider this fact, Brandon was speaking informally to the woman. She seems to be a junior at his office. They were talking about work, and she called him Brandon. As I cried alone in the study, there was a knock at the door. Sarah, is something wrong? No, it's nothing. I said hastily. Then, I slowly shook my head. It's nothing. How could that be? I'm sorry, Brandon. Sarah? Brandon's voice sounded puzzled. I opened the door and faced him. Brandon looked startled. Hey, why are you crying? I couldn't trust you. So I planted a listening device. I'm sorry. At my apology, Brandon blinked. A listening device? No way. I also found out you were cheating. But by using such a cowardly method, I'm the worst. Forgive me, Brandon. I was about to say that I forgive you too, but Brandon spoke first. How much did it cost? Huh? For a moment, I thought he was asking about the price of the listening device. But he wasn't. Brandon chuckled and said, What a coincidence. I actually hired a detective because you've been coming home late lately. I'm not cheating, you know. Right. Instead, you're secretly planning to buy a high-rise condo, aren't you? That's... I was at a loss for words. That was true. After much deliberation from my savings and income, I had decided to move to a place with better transportation options. The condo that Brandon mentioned caught my eye. Not only is it close to the station, it's new and full of life. The night view must be spectacular. It was slightly over budget, but I had decided to buy that condo. That's why I had been coming home late, due to the paperwork. Why didn't you tell me? That's because your birthday is coming up, right? I intended it as a surprise gift. A gift? For me? Brandon looked surprised. But of course. He is my husband. We would be living there together, so it would also be a gift for Brandon. Huh. If I made you anxious, I'm sorry. But I swear, I'm not cheating, and I want us to live in the new place together. Thank you, Sarah. Brandon grinned, and I felt relieved. He seemed happy. I managed to apologize for the listening device successfully. Just when I thought we could reconcile. Sarah, could you meet Emily? Who? Oh, come on. The mistress you figured out about. Brandon said cheerfully. I recoiled, unable to understand his nerves. Emily is a junior at my office, but her family is wealthy and she's young with potential. Honestly, she's a better match for me than you are. So? Wait, don't say that. Yes. Please divorce me, Sarah. A deep despair crawled up from my feet. I used to love Brandon's smile. But now, that smile is terrifying. Forgotten tears once again streamed down my cheeks. Crying again. Oh, excuse me. I'll call her over now. Why? How can you laugh so much? I felt utterly miserable, but I couldn't help but ask. It was my fault. But Brandon, that's too much. Not only did you cheat and then brazenly ask me to meet your mistress. Otherwise, you wouldn't give up on me, right? Please understand clearly. You and I are not a good match. I deserve someone young and talented like Emily. What do you mean by that? I wiped my tears and glared at Brandon. Then why did you marry me in the first place? Well, it was because of the financial stability. That's why I've always been considerate towards you, you know? That's terrible. I couldn't stand any longer. I slumped down on the spot. Brandon turned his back on me and started walking, heading for the entrance while making a call on his smartphone. Emily? Come over now. The old lady just won't agree to break up with me. Can you help convince her? Brandon. I yelled. Brandon stopped and turned around. His eyes were cold. Well, that's that. What do you mean? I'll gratefully accept the condo. It's a gift for me, right? But I won't be living there with you. Brandon's smile suddenly disappeared. Then, he turned again towards the entrance. I stood dumbfounded, watching his back. Soon, the sound of a car stopping in front of the house was heard. At the doorway, Brandon said something. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. The footsteps of two people, and their giggling voices. Sarah, sorry to keep you waiting. Nice to meet you. The woman smiled slightly. At first glance, she seemed polite, but her eyes carried a mocking glint. They looked down on me as I slumped down. Then, with unpleasant smiles spreading across their faces, they spoke in unison. I'm going to live with my mistress from tomorrow. Old hag, get out of my house. With those words, I understood. To Brandon, I was no longer of any use. Silently, I stood up from where I was. Well, better start preparing to move. Emily, you pack your things too. Yes. Living in a new high-rise condo is like a dream. They left me behind and were frolicking. I sighed. That helped me switch my emotions. Oh, Sarah. About the divorce papers. Huh? I'm single, you know? Huh? With a dumbfounded voice, they turned their gazes towards me. We've been divorced for a while now. Remember, we promised long ago. If you cheat 3 times, we divorce. That was supposed to be a joke. I was serious. Saying so, I pulled out the divorce papers from the desk drawer. Brandon's eyes bulged as he scrutinized the contents. It seemed he didn't even remember submitted them back then. We wrote each other's names when we made that promise, remember? I thought I had thrown that away. Brandon looked bewildered. I stared at him and said, I've been saving it all along. This is just a copy, the original has already been processed. When did this happen? Brandon was stunned, and I crossed my arms and continued. After the last time you cheated. This is the 4th time. Yes. We were no longer husband and wife. Yet, I continued to support Brandon. I couldn't leave him. So, I didn't tell him when I filed for divorce, and we continued living together. But now, I've reached my limit. I've been managing the living expenses separately. All your food and allowance came out of your account. Then, what about my savings? Brandon's face turned pale. He was aware of how extravagantly he had been living. Emily, frowning, slightly distanced herself from Brandon. As if to say, this wasn't what she signed up for. I'll be living in the condo alone. You two, who are strangers, have no rights to it. But it was supposed to be a gift for me. That was if you continued living with me. I dismissed Brandon's pleading tone. This is. Brandon, why did you call me out at this time, just for this? This isn't what we agreed on. Emily showed her selfish anger. Brandon looked displeased. Quiet. I didn't expect this to happen either. You bragged that your wife was so into you, and yet you were dumped long ago. You're in the same boat as being dumped. Huh? Emily looked puzzled. While I was disgusted, I said, your parents are executives at our company. So I've spoken to them. It's not right to make them so sad. What do you know about me? Emily blustered as best she could. But she must have some realization within her. She was sweating on her forehead. Your parents went to great lengths to make you a model. They regret that now. Huh? Why now, Dad? They thought there would be benefits for themselves if you succeeded as a model. So they supported you. But you've been partying all night and even got in trouble with the police. They're tired of covering up for you. The misdeeds of their arrogant daughter had exhausted her parents. I had curiously received that consultation. And at that time, the answer I gave them was to cut off ties with their daughter. What did you just say? Your father has decided to disown you and make your serious younger sister the heir. Then that's a different story. Brandon shouted, echoing what Emily had just exclaimed. These two were attracted to each other only by interests. They cared only for the economic benefits of the other, not at all for each other's well-being. I don't believe it. It must be the old woman's sour grapes. Really? But what have I lost? I'm moving into the condo. None of the money Brandon squandered came from my wallet, so no financial loss for me. You're a loser because your husband cheated on you. Brandon howled pathetically. Looking at his face, he seemed ready to cry. Brandon had approached me relying on my financial strength. But in reality, all the money regarding him had been drawn from his savings from when he was younger. As a result, his savings were now nearly depleted, Since Emily is also a spendthrift, the savings of the two were mere pennies. Moreover, neither had anyone else to rely on. I'm selling this house, so you two can go live wherever you like. What? Are you throwing us out? You tried to take the condo from me, didn't you? In that respect, nothing has changed from when you planned to kick out your former partner with nothing but themselves. Don't worry. I'll leave your furniture as it is. It was bought with your money, after all. Don't joke with me. Who's joking? I blew away Brandon's anger with a mere snort. You don't work and just laze around all day at home. To top it off, you gamble. Did you really think that was acceptable? My voice was cold. Brandon's voice, on the other hand, was tinged with panic. I'm not a jobless, I'm a model. Just in a recharging period. He said up to there, hesitating. He must understand, deep down. It's about himself, after all. Right. So during times you don't earn, you should manage with your own money. I said, as if instructing. But Brandon seemed to find something to counter in those words. He retorted. That doesn't mean you can just take from my savings without permission. I haven't touched your money at all. I said with a laugh. By then, my tears had stopped. Only my sincerity remained unstoppable. All that I had been holding back was spilling out one after another. Besides, I don't need to rely on your money. My income isn't low. Brandon groaned. What is this? We're cornered. We lost, didn't we? Yes. It was now clear who was the winner and who was the loser. Brandon gathered his things and left the house sheepishly. For the time being, it seems he'll be depending on Emily's apartment. They should think about how to manage their lives from now on during this time. As declared, I sold the house and moved into the mentioned condo. It's empty, isn't it? There was, of course, a reason for moving. The original place was inconvenient in terms of transport, but more importantly, I was looking ahead to the future. If I had children with Brandon, they would need their own room. And surely, it's better if the school is nearby. This condo met all those conditions. But it all came to nothing. Brandon and I broke up and started living separately. There would be no children. During these 4 years, I never got pregnant. For one person, the space is too luxurious. I could have forgiven him. I muttered. I somehow knew that Brandon was with me for the money. Still, I thought he liked me a bit. That was wishful thinking, as revealed by his words. Since when have I been an old hag? I looked at my face in the mirror. Engrossed in work, my face was light on makeup. It was a face that had seen its fair share of hardships. With the hardships etched as fine lines and bags under the eyes. My long black hair was carelessly tied back, a sullen woman, that's me. When did I become like this? Before I was married, I used to care more about fashion. Wearing crisp suits, adorning myself with favorite cufflinks, choosing trendy lipstick. Since when, like this? I bit my pale, unlipsticked lips. I never neglected housework. In my work, I steadily achieved results. I am an elite. Yet, as a housewife, I failed. What went wrong? At that moment, my smartphone rang. It was a call from Brandon. Hello? Sarah, please reconsider. That was Brandon's first sentence. A voice begging, desperate, cornered. I can't make it with Emily. She can't cook, and she suddenly stopped getting work. Well, why don't you two get a job then? I said nonchalantly. I remembered Brandon's face. Brandon, who had never known hardship, looked younger than his actual age. Unfamiliar with wrinkles or gray hair, he always dressed in branded clothes. But now, that vitality was missing from Brandon. Please, Sarah. Let's start over. But I'm not suitable for you, am I? I retorted. It seems I cared more about those words than I thought. I was wrong. You are a respectable person. In terms of social status, that might be true. Not just that. You always prepared warm meals for me. And the clothes were always freshly washed. You were amazing as a housewife. Brandon praised me excessively. But that was only the convenient aspects of me he liked. He never praised my appearance or personality. I was disgusted with myself. I was crazy about such a man. Let me ask you in return. What is it? What about you is suitable for me?
Uh.
At my words, Brandon was speechless. I'm a manager at a globally renowned company. I've never slacked off to get to this position. What about you? Have you made any effort since you were sidelined from work? That's. Brandon hesitated. No wonder. He really hadn't made any effort. Being sidelined was due to not practicing your acting. And just bossing the staff around until you were abandoned by everyone. What part of that person is suitable as my husband? I was desperate to make a comeback. Brandon exclaimed as if shouting. It had an empty ring to it. In reality, Brandon hadn't made any effort nor achieved any results. I suffered too. Anyone can suffer. What did you do about it? Other than ranking high in mobile games, what did you do? I did work. Brandon's voice was feeble. He must understand. Brandon had merely indulged in a life dependent on me. That was, in fact, a lifestyle funded by draining his own savings. Without realizing it, he continued to squander like water. It's the fault of those guys at the job. Brandon said as if he just thought of it. He was now retreating into a shell of self-pity and self-preservation. They unfairly call me a freeloader and a jobless. If it was so shameful, why didn't you work to clear your name? My voice was tinged with tears. You're a devil, saying that to hurt me further. Brandon spat out. I almost laughed. Old hag, and now a devil. How much more could he underestimate me? Since you have influence, you could have boosted me. Maybe even got me into the company commercials. I don't mix business with personal affairs. I cut off his resentful words. We were married, after all. I knew your abilities better than anyone. That's why I couldn't introduce you to anyone. If I did, I would only lose credibility. Not just me, but the company would become a laughing stock. It's not that bad. No, it was. I asserted that it was indeed that bad. Brandon didn't understand acting. He didn't conform to others or polish his acting. He skipped voice training to hang out and repeatedly arrived late selfishly. How could I recommend such a person? If you had faced your job and still failed, I wouldn't blame you. But that wasn't your case. You didn't put in the effort to improve. Even if I practiced, with my looks and talent. Brandon mumbled in response. Everyone else has looks and talent, there's no way I could compete. It was your lack of self-belief that disappointed me. I was startled by my own words. Yes. I disliked Brandon because he didn't believe in himself, didn't evaluate himself. And decided that his efforts were futile. Why do you deny your own possibilities? By running away like that, you're hopeless. You wouldn't understand, being successful. Brandon unilaterally ended the call. His voice was tinged with self-pitying tears. I silently shook my head. I've never for a moment thought I had any talent. Everyone feels inferior at times, that they aren't blessed. That's why I worked hard. I compensated for being less by spending more time on work. That's what led to my current evaluation. But Brandon crushed even that possibility. I sighed, resigned. I heard rumors that our subsidiary was considering using Emily as a poster model. I didn't mind. At least in terms of work, Emily was more diligent than Brandon. I accepted that fact when the executives raised their voices. Emily is not suitable. If we use someone malicious like her, it will make our products unsellable. Astonishingly, that was Emily's father. Why are you taking away your daughter's job? I couldn't bear it and asked. Emily's father spoke with a voice heavy with deep anguish. Have you seen her posts on social media? No. It's terrible. Full of insults and complaints about others. She can work, but that makes her look down on others all the more. That's the biggest problem, Emily's father explained. Because she's my daughter, I can't forgive her. And towards you too. There was fault on my part, too, right? I gave a wry smile and said. According to Brandon, I'm an old hag and a devil, plain and unimpressive to look at. I suppose that's reason enough, at least for him. I'm sorry about my daughter. No, it's all right. More than an apology, I was actually asked by someone I know. They heard of your reputation and want you to marry their son. I'm not considering remarriage right now. I shook my head, indicating I wasn't thinking about it. Emily's father nodded in understanding. That's reasonable. But I want you to think about it calmly. After all, the person interested is the president's son. Emily's father said, crossing his arms. I was taken aback. A marriage proposal with the president's son was completely unexpected. I learned that the son was the same age as Brandon. However, he has been so dedicated to his work that he's never had a girlfriend. Emily's father continued to earnestly persuade me. He must really regret his daughter's actions. I felt somewhat guilty. It can't be helped. I'll at least meet with the president, that should fulfill my obligation to him. I was led by Emily's father to the president's office. At the door, Emily's father parted ways with me. The president is waiting inside. Thank you for showing me in. No, thank you for agreeing. Emily's father left, looking satisfied. I straightened my posture once more. I knocked on the door. A gentle voice responded. Come in. Yes. The president's office was spacious. A tall man with white hair, which gave him a distinguished appearance, was waiting for me at the center. The president shared a brief overview of his son's story. It seemed he was serious about the marriage proposal. As I hesitated on how to respond, the president said, It might be rude to say, but I think you and my son are quite similar. That's not true at all. I was completely taken aback. The president leaned forward slightly, observing me. Then, a knock on the door was heard. Excuse me. You're late, Albert. The young man referred to as Albert put his hand on his chest politely. My apologies. I was discussing the next project with my colleagues. And it became more heated than expected. Didn't I tell you? That's the kind of man he is. The president seemed slightly exasperated with his son. Then, he clasped his hands together as if praying and said, Albert, Sarah. Would you meet alone just once? If you don't get along, you can laugh it off as my misjudgment. Dad. If that's the case, I guess it can't be helped. Would you mind accompanying me, Sarah? Yes, I would. Thus, Albert and I ended up having a sort of date. We went to see a movie and had dinner at a restaurant afterward. It turned out to be a very meaningful time. Albert and I shared similar interests and had productive conversations. We indeed seemed to be quite alike. However, to this day, Albert and I have not developed a romantic relationship. I gained a friend who is a good confidant and discussion partner. It seems he felt the same about me. Talking with you, Sarah, always sparks new ideas. That's great to hear. That day, we met again at a cafe after work and chatted. I thought it would be nice if we could continue this kind of relationship forever. Just then, I've found you. You are. It was you. You're the one who fed all those things to my dad, ruining my job. Emily's voice was low, almost a growl. She lacked the vibrancy I had seen in her before. Emily appeared cornered. That was evident. And Emily was blaming me for everything. I won't forgive you. It's all your fault that I. Emily's fault, how? Albert stood up from his chair, positioning himself between Emily and me, protectively. Emily's eyes widened. You, how? Do you know me? Unbelievable. Why would Albert be with someone like you? Emily's words had a trace of admiration for Albert. It seemed she had given up on Brandon and was now targeting Albert. However, Albert appeared to be unaware of Emily's intentions. Please leave. I have nothing to discuss with someone who insults my friend. How can it be? Rejected by the person she admired, Emily showed signs of being hurt. She glared at me with increasing resentment. Why is it always you who gets liked by guys with good prospects? I don't know. I thought Emily was misunderstanding something. Albert is a friend. In that sense, I do think he likes me, but it's slightly different. While you are jealous, she is trying to learn and utilize her experiences. She's someone I respect. Don't speak ill of her. Respect, for such an old woman. You'd better watch your mouth. That's no way to speak to a woman. His tone was like scolding a child. Emily teared up and backed away. Albert. I don't know you. And I don't want to. Please leave. With those words, Emily burst into tears. Sobbing loudly, she ran out of the cafe. Left behind, we were stunned for a moment. Coming to his senses, Albert apologized. Albert? Even though I got heated, I addressed you by your first name. It's impolite, especially since I'm not your boyfriend. Don't worry about it. No, I insist. It was unusual stubbornness for Albert. He glanced around hesitantly and then said reluctantly. Sarah, instead of just being friends, would you consider being my girlfriend? Now it was my turn to be bewildered. As I looked away, Albert continued. I knew you were cautious because of your previous marriage. And that's why I thought we should just be good friends. Albert. But I want to be honest about my feelings now. Saying so, Albert took my hand. I was startled. At that moment, I realized. Our friendship had just come to a crossroads. Now we either part ways or become closer. And we made our choice. I am much older than you. Being younger doesn't mean I'll be dependent. I'm a man too, and I'll support you as best as I can. With those words, I made up my mind. It was indeed like the saying, after rain comes fair weather. And so, we started dating. After dating Albert, for 6 months, we got engaged. How much is left on the condo mortgage? I'll pay for it. That's not right. After discussing it, we decided to split the mortgage payments for the condo. At the same time, we began living together, and Albert's belongings started to fill the room. This novel. I've read it too. Really? Despite its calm prose, it's got bold plots and character settings that are really compelling. What do you think? I feel exactly the same. We laughed together, holding our stomachs. Why do we get along so well? Albert. What is it? I wish I had met you sooner, I said, leaning close to him. It was a confession of weakness. I had never shown my vulnerability to anyone before. But with him, I could. Because now, I understood what it meant to rely on someone. Then maybe I wouldn't have had to go through all that sadness. I'm sorry. Albert looked down. I gave a wry smile. Why are you apologizing? If only I had found you sooner. Seriously. Once again, we were thinking the same thing. We both wished we had met each other sooner. But in retrospect, perhaps my life with Brandon was a necessary detour. Because my previous husband did nothing, I got better at household chores. Indeed, your cooking is delicious. Laughing, Albert hugged me. I will never let you go. Yes. I blushed but nodded. The smartphone rang. Surely Brandon was either trying to reconcile or asking for money. I knew it, yet I did not answer the call. Because as long as Albert and I are together, that's all we need.